Good morning. How are you, Suzanne?
Good morning, Deborah Leanne.
Is everything good in your world? We've both been traveling so much.
I feel like um, when I, what was I traveling for several weeks? It feels like years. So I'm getting back home and I'm just adjusting to the vibe here. It's rather interesting.
Yeah,
Ooh.
I've been calling it re-entry in my journaling because we both had these profound experiences and then to come back into where we have to do laundry and be with our partners and clean the kitchen and I'm like, what? So,
We get it all. That's the totality of this experience.
right. So, so I want to play with the suggestion that we got the other day about defining these terms. Like, I understand what compromise is, and I remember hearing in a relationship course, man, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago, about compromise is actually more hurtful
Mm.
than giving in to someone else because you're giving because if you come into where I want this and you want that and I'm like, okay, I'll give you half of what you want and I get half of what I want, it's like both people lose, right?
Right.
So I want to play with that because I feel like compromise is what we do with life.
Yeah. So
If we make a deal, like if
yeah,
I
let's make a
get through
deal.
this day, if I can just, get through this meeting, if I can just get to this place safely, what if I wanted to arrive in the meeting in my full embodied loving presence self?
Mm,
I don't think about asking for that. I think about the basic, you know, I'll do this and you do this kind of thing. I don't know. Thoughts?
so before we drop in, for those of you that are joining us, we're talking about this week the 14th gene key, and this is moving from compromise to bounteousness through competence. And what we're doing is we're radiating prosperity just by being us. And so Deborah is playing around right now in compromise, how we sometimes do that just to appease other people. And we just play nice. And
And
I
give
think
up.
that,
Yeah.
yeah. So I love, I have a quote here that's by Richard Rudd. This is studying the gene keys with Richard Rudd. And when you compromise your life, I want you to picture being a piece of furniture on a movie set.
He said that's what was it Buddha? I mean, who was it? One of his oh no, it was the guy that designed human design, Ra,
Oh, raw.
teacher.
Mhm.
Said that's
Yeah.
how he defined this gene key is that compromise equals furniture.
Furniture.
He would just call people like they're in their furniture state. And I'm like,
Yeah. Like, because they're not lighting up being themselves. They're,
which is really truly not being
yeah,
human, right?
right, right.
Um,
And yeah,
so that was funny to me that to hear that furniture statement
yeah.
um, and 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 what does compromise do when we layer it upon day and day out and all of our interactions? And I mean, if we think about our life, how much of it do we live full on lit up? Well, I think that's what's exhausting for you and I when we were in these high states of beingness, right? Our amazing energetic spaces that we were in. And then to come home and it's like, oh, fighting with somebody over the money and broken washing machine and all of it just feels like I don't know how to take that state into my everyday life. And this plant and I are having a little bit of a fight here. So let me just adjust.
Okay, you
So
adjust.
thoughts around that.
Well, I got an image of a bunch of gray people just walking around, and it's about, I see that it's like and when I learned from Jesse Elder years ago, it takes away, we like release some type of personal freedom when we live in this mediocrity. I love just, and I'm not saying that doing the dishes and doing that stuff, that can be very high vibe and like very
Absolutely.
enlightening. You can have epiphanies while you're doing this work, but it's when you feel as though your personal freedom is like not available and you have given it away to somebody else.
Yeah.
That's where the rub is.
And
That's
that's where I, for some reason, I feel like I dim my light
mhm.
versus I felt so lit up in this space, so seen, so heard, so held. And then to come here where I'm not getting that kind of, which is what life is, right? We don't
Right.
always get nourished and fed the way we want to be. And yet, how do we stay connected in that high vibing space where I can still love, even when it's not something that I love? um,
Well, I think too, that's when we get to remember that we supply that to ourselves.
yeah, it's not coming from outside.
It's not coming from outside of us. We get to tune in to what lights us up. We get to tune in to freshness and newness and our inner fire and our creative genius. And so,
Yeah, I keep remembering by coming back in and doing my centering and opening my body because I want to go immediately to I have to protect.
mm,
Like, and then of course, what am I doing? I'm like taking that light and kind of covering it up with a big old lampshade, And
right.
so that's how I see it anyway. So don't you love imagery? So I think I think everybody has an opportunity to understand where, and I really want to play with somatics a bit more about where does compromise live in you? Like when you're in a compromised state, not an unconscious one, because there's a lot of those, but one where you can go, oh yeah, I gave up my power there. Oh yeah, I turned my light off there. What do you do? Because I literally fold my arms, I cover my chest,
I
my belly,
I literally shut down.
like turn off your voice box.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because that's what I did this morning. I was like,
I
maybe
with
it's not
I
going to.
withdraw. Yeah. But I know that, and so yeah, to keep the peace I sometimes do that. And I actually I find it really helpful when I can catch myself and be like, "Oh, that's interesting. Why am I feeling, because I was feeling anxious or I was feeling frustrated about something, and I was like, what's going on? It's because I'm not voicing how I'm feeling. I'm
Mm,
not letting another person understand where I'm coming from. I'm squelching my light, and basically my soul is giving me a kick in the pants."
yeah, and
In
we
fact, I
lit.
can't.
Yeah, yeah, I am too. I'm one. So I mean, I already had a conversation about this morning that maybe if I just stay quiet, I can still tap into my loving space because I tend to lose it sometimes when it comes out. It doesn't come out very loving.
Well, and that's where we find out in ourselves that that whole like, is what we're thinking useful, kind, you know, what, because you want this, what comes out of your mouth, to be authentic. You want it to be real. You want it to be um loving. You want it to be connecting. And a lot of times we don't.
Yeah.
A lot of times so it's just being aware of when those things happen, like sit back in ourself and be like, okay, are we ready to speak our truth in a
Am
way that can,
I, and I'm going to invite you to use,
yes, right.
am
Can I speak
I,
my truth?
yes,
Can I speak my truth
with
in a
love.
way, yes, in a way that can be heard? And if it's not understood, can I accept that as well and still show up without closing off?
And loving ourselves. This is a funny thing because very
Yeah.
often I'm thinking, am I saying this because I want him to love me more?
Mm.
Or am I saying this, can I love me even as I'm saying this? Because I think it starts there for me. And
Well,
when I'm doing that outward focus thing of I want him to
yeah.
understand, I'm like, whoa, whoa, can I understand? Can I hold myself? And then, oh, we're getting way off topic here. But anyway,
Okay.
but I
So,
love that we are speaking to what are ways to play with the compromise, which gets us to the gift state, which is,
oh, I was going to just talk a minute about the repressive and the,
oh, please do. That's a
okay.
good,
So,
yeah.
so the repressive nature of this particular note, shall we say, is impotence. It's kind of like when you feel completely powerless and you're not fulfilled. So I think I was talking like feeling gray, like you just, the light's not on,
Right. Right.
right?
Right.
And it takes a lot of courage to stand in your aloneness and in your own unique fire. Okay, just kudos to you for all of us that can do that. All right, I just want to give a hey to all of us that do that. Because it's it's repressed, right? So the reactive nature is it's talking about being enslaved. And so people react to try to prove themselves and they boister themselves up, and it is an insecurity, but it's you kind of are unleashing your potential, but you're kind of scattered and like
Well, you're
boisterous.
pushing it. It sounds like
Yeah,
you're like pushing it out there. Like, do you see me? Huh?
yeah,
And
yeah.
then it's not
And
very invitational.
what we really understand is that true power doesn't come from insecurity. True power doesn't need to prove itself to the world.
Right. It kind of
It
just
shows up.
emanates.
Yes,
Mhm.
it emanates. Exactly. So it's only concerned about what's at hand in the moment.
Okay.
It's not, you know, 5 miles behind or 20 miles ahead. It's taking care of business right
It's
then and
that
there.
lighthouse, right?
Yep.
Grounded, just doing my thing. Just
Beaming,
what
bling,
beaming. Uh,
beaming.
okay. Now can we talk about
Now,
the gift of it?
we can talk about competence. Yes. And when I first heard of competence, I was kind of like, oh, that sounds very blasé, you know,
In what way? Why?
because it's like, well, you're competent. Like,
Oh,
you know what just arrived? It's like when I used to take those uh you'd have those feedback forms from your boss, and on a
reviews.
scale of what it like on a scale of excellence to competence to needs a little bit more work or whatever. I felt like competence maybe is part of my perfectionism or something, and I was like, well, competent, damn, I'm excellent.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
like,
I don't want to just be competent.
I don't want to just be competent,
I want to
but
be, exceeding
right,
expectations versus,
exactly.
yeah. I used to write those darn performance
Oh my gosh.
evaluations. I
So,
know the wording.
but
I know.
you'll love the way that this gift shows up because it is competence, and it's like sitting in your genius. It's 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 your own empowerment. It's when somebody is competent, they're deeply fulfilled by what they do. They're doing something that nobody else does in a way that they do it only, and it can be applied anywhere, and you have the simplest and quickest solutions to any particular problem or obstacle. Like you are
Oh,
just in your genius. And so, yeah, that's competent. Like, because
yeah.
you're you know,
And
you
that,
just do it.
so
And what might be hard for someone else, you do like effortless. I
naturally,
mean,
yeah.
have you,
It's what I call, it's like using our God-given natural
right,
talents, strengths, skills. We call them leadership competencies. And but it's the ones where you're operating from love,
right,
not from fear. Because when you
right,
operate from fear, then you're, those repressive things you were talking about, or the let me tell you how fabulous I am versus
right.
I am. Let me show you my unique, brilliant light, that has you know, these
So
gifts.
what Richard says in this quote is competence carries within it efficiency, enthusiasm, flair, flexibility, the four keys to material success. Because only you hold that key, you know? So it's, I just saw this image of, our infinity sign, and you're switching from, your logical brain and your creative brain, and you're going back and forth. And so you're creative, and then you're receptive to your own genius and what you're sharing with the world. So it's
Yeah, and that means we're really truly online, right?
yeah,
Versus just one side running the show. We're
right.
operating with our wholeness or from integrity or whatever you want to call that. Ooh, I love that definition. So I have a thought around when we're feeling the compromise place, how do you shift into competency? Like where I mean, what would be a way that you would go, oh, I'm holding down my, I'm making some kind of deal with the universe that if I do that, how do you switch into I am competent and
Yeah,
you know
right. So I would, first of all, it's like, got to watch ourselves. And when those, mm, I think I said a couple weeks ago, the itty bitty shitty committee comes in and go, wait, that's a lie about me. Hold on a second. I know that I'm much more than this. Um, and that's when we drop into our presence and feel into our heart space from that place and remember who we are before we speak.
yeah,
Because our words matter, right? And we don't
absolutely.
need, our words can be swords
Oh,
as well as a big hug.
yeah.
So it's being impeccable with our voice and our sound
And our energy,
and our energy. Exactly.
because when our energy is out of alignment, man, our body will not be telling the same story as our words. And that's when it gets dissonant, where people can't hear us. They're like, what?
Yeah.
Um,
And even the tone in your voice.
yeah, which is another, yeah, nonverbal. Um, and what is the statistics? It's like I've heard anywhere from 70 to 90% of communications are not the words being said.
No.
It's the tonality, it's the volume. It's
Well,
what's
and
behind the words, right?
yeah, and not to mention all our nonverbal psychic abilities. I
Well,
mean,
there's all that too.
there's
Yeah.
right. So people
So
can
picking up. Hmm.
picking up what you're putting down. So even if Deborah and I were just to sit here without saying anything and just to share our heart with you, I mean, how would that feel? You know, we just can hang out.
There's that's so we should try that sometime. I actually had a course I did 30 something years ago, man. 34 years ago or something. I did like one of those personal and professional things. And somebody said, or the teacher, the facilitator says the very first night, she says, here's some ground rules. And I ask that you participate in every exercise. Now you don't have to. You could take your chair and go sit in that corner over there for all 4 days and you'll get the same experience. We're laughing, going, how would you learn everything experientially if you don't play the games,
Right.
And now I'm going, oh, I get it.
Observing through osmosis.
Right. All chips rise, right? When
Yeah.
somebody else is getting their, which is why in group retreats, in group meditations, in group, coaching sessions, facilitation, each one of those, somebody has a huge breakthrough and we all are like,
Ooh.
oh, so we get to benefit by somebody else doing the heavy lifting, which isn't always, but it's the way it is. So thank you for that. And I want to take some time to really play with the beautiful citic state of bounteousness because many of
Mm,
us get really freaked out about prosperity and abundance and manifestation, and which
I
feels
know.
very pushy and
Feels
and
very
I
heady.
yeah. So,
Um,
so how do you play with bounteousness? Does this show up? Is this in your Gene Keith map?
I don't think so, but that's okay.
Okay, well,
I'll claim it.
I have the programming partner, and I want to speak to that at some point.
Yeah. I'll claim it because what is so beautiful about this key is when you get into the acidic state, it's creating something out of nothing. It's like spinning gold, you know?
Uh,
And that's when you are in your genius, you know that you will always be cared for. I mean, we all are cared for anyways. Can we just acknowledge that?
can we
We are,
relax into that
can we
versus,
relax? Yeah.
I gotta,
Yeah,
I
I
gotta, I
know.
gotta make it happen, or laying back, going, okay, come to me. There's a state in
Yeah.
the middle of contemplative action, of receiving inspiration, of creating to make the space, or letting go to make the space where these beautiful things drop in. So I love, I'm getting better about the whole bounteousness, and
I
you
mean,
coach, you
let's
did
just
me the
feel
other day.
that word.
Yeah.
Feel the word bounteousness.
It just feels so expansive. And can I allow that into my life? Will
Yeah.
I allow that into my life? So it's allowing before we can accept, before we can receive, and then noticing. I think that's one of the things I love about noticing is a huge piece of gratitude, because then you're like, oh, look, I have delicious coffee to drink this morning. I
Yep.
get to have time with Suzanne, one of my besties on the planet. So what is beautiful and right versus the broken washing machine.
Right. So and as we acknowledge all of those things that we appreciate, it appreciates and gets larger.
Yes.
And those things, it's like the intention and attention and the things that we focus on starts to grow. So let's be fertile in those things that we want and focus our energy on that and our gifts. And recognize that we have infinite possibility. God's given us these gifts for a reason. And so, as Richard Rudd says, the overflowing fertile potential within humans is almost infinite. I would gather to say it is infinite.
Mhm.
If we are of the divine, it's omnipotence. It's bounteousness. We are living and breathing beings of light from divinity. So of
Mhm.
course we're going to be constantly in this expansive field where we can create and spin gold, our
Yeah.
gold. What might look like gold to someone else does not look like gold to us. And likewise, each one of us has the things like what might be really super important to someone may not be my jam, and that's okay. But we can all rest assured that each one of us has exactly what we need and more that fulfill us and light us up.
And I want to share the mudra for this.
Okay.
And I'm not going to stand, but I am going to invite everybody, if you want to play with us, that this is, and I just read this morning. I bought the series of mudras years ago, and I have really been playing with them more and more lately. And I just read today about by practicing a mudra every day for 1 week, it shifts the energetic flow in our body of opening to this citic state. And I was like,
All right, let's do it.
why am I doing it? Anyway, but that was then, this is now. Okay. So you take your right hand and place it over your belly.
Okay.
Take your left hand and place it on top of the right hand. All of our prosperity is within. This is our creative power center, right? So and what I have added is breathing in and allowing the belly to rise and kind of arching my back a little bit and opening my heart, and then exhaling. And then your back gets kind of arched the other way. So you're flexing into your spine and you're teaching your body that I can receive and I can let go without any fear that there won't be enough, right? Oh, man. So I invite us all to play with that. Let's see what happens collectively if we allow ourselves to receive our breath all the way down in our power center, our creative center, our center of beingness, and see what happens. And playing with the receiving of the breath and the releasing of the breath, which is I think sometimes we feel like we need to take in, take in, take in, and we're not like going, I trust that as I exhale, there's another inhale right behind that. So I'm gonna just invite that. And then the programming partner, which is in my chart, has to do with exquisiteness. And this is, I'm going to play with this because I'm like, why not program my system to this? So, and that is similarly taking your left hand on your belly
Mm-hmm.
and taking your right hand and just letting it, as opposed to doing an okay, which is like stiff, and letting it rest, which makes it kind of like an eye, like I think he calls it the Buddha expression. And it looks like an eye to me. And just holding that. This is exquisiteness.
Mm.
And it's our exquisiteness in our being, which is where we tap the bounteousness from. So I thank you for playing with me. That was really deliciousness.
Yes.
And I would just like to invite that anybody who has questions, who has comments, who wants to see a different dimension of our conversations. I mean, we're doing this out of just connecting and fun and learning together, and then sharing it with you all. And so it's a co-creative, co-learning space, and we're welcome and open to if there's something that would serve you better. Do you want to add to that, Suzanne?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Excelente.
Yes.
So anyway, until our next time together, during this week, especially of gratitude and thanks,
And
really
appreciation.
noticing, yeah, really noticing what is beautiful and bounteous in your life and where you can tap into that within you. So thank you for playing.
Have a great week.